There's a certain kind of person who reads the room before they read the menu, who notices a shift in someone's voice before the words even change, who can walk into a space and know within seconds that something is slightly off, even when everyone else is smiling and saying everything is fine. They don't call it a skill. They don't even think about it. It just happens. And often it's exhausting in a way that's very hard to explain to people who don't do the same thing. If that sounds familiar, stay with this. Most people assume that kind of awareness is just sensitivity or anxiety or being too in your head. Society tends to reward a different kind of intelligence, the kind that shows up on tests in boardrooms and confident speeches. The quiet, hyper-aware, emotionally intricate mind often gets labeled as overthinking, overly cautious, hard to read, sometimes even difficult. But that framing misses almost everything important about what's actually happening. What's rarely talked about and almost never named correctly is something researchers and clinicians have started calling traumatic intelligence. It's not a clinical diagnosis, it's a pattern. A very specific kind of cognitive and emotional development that emerges not from privilege or ease, but from navigating environments that were unpredictable, painful, or emotionally unsafe, often at a young age. It is, in a very real sense, intelligence born from survival. The neuroscience here is worth understanding, not as a fact to memorize, but as a mirror. When a child grows up in an environment where emotional safety is inconsistent, where a parent's mood was unpredictable, where conflict came without warning, where love felt conditional, the brain adapts. The amygdala, which processes threat and emotional memory, becomes highly calibrated. The nervous system learns to scan constantly, not because the person chose to be this way, but because reading the environment accurately was at some point genuinely necessary. Dr. Bruce Perry's research on childhood adversity shows that early stress doesn't just affect behavior, it physically shapes neural pathways. The brain literally rewires itself around the information it receives most often. And when that information is, the world is unpredictable, pay attention, the brain becomes extraordinarily good at exactly that. What develops isn't damage. What develops is a form of intelligence that most people never acquire. People with traumatic intelligence tend to process emotional information at a speed and depth that others simply don't. They notice microexpressions. They sense when someone's words and body language are slightly misaligned. They pick up on group dynamics before anyone has said anything out loud. They are often the first to know when a relationship is quietly shifting, when someone is performing okayness rather than feeling it, when the atmosphere in a room has changed. They also tend to think in layers. A conversation isn't just what was said, it's what wasn't said, what the timing meant, what it might mean for later. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition that was trained early and trained hard. And there's more. People who develop this kind of intelligence often have a remarkable capacity for empathy. Not the surface kind, but the kind that actually understands what someone is holding before they say it. They've spent so much of their lives tracking the emotional states of others that they developed an almost unconscious fluency in it. They are often the people others turn to when something real is happening, not because they advertise themselves as understanding, but because they actually are. Here's something worth sitting with though, because it's the part that often goes unnoticed. This intelligence comes with a cost that doesn't announce itself. The same nervous system that makes you extraordinarily perceptive in difficult moments also makes it genuinely hard to rest, to turn the scanning off, to be in a room with people you love and not still, quietly be reading the room. The brain that learned to stay alert does not easily believe that it's safe to stop. So there's often a gap between how calm someone with traumatic intelligence appears and how much is actually moving beneath the surface, between how attuned they are to others and how little time they spend being that attuned to themselves, between the intelligence they offer the world and the exhaustion that no one sees them carrying. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system working exactly as it was designed to work. The nervous system doesn't know the original threat is gone. It only knows what it was trained to do. It's also worth being clear about something.
traumatic intelligence isn't better or worse than other forms of intelligence. It isn't a superpower, and it isn't a wound, and it isn't both of those things dramatically. It's simply a form of development. Some people grew up in environments that trained their minds toward analytical thinking, others toward creativity or social fluency or academic performance. People who grew up navigating emotional complexity developed a particular kind of sensitivity and awareness that most developmental psychologists would describe as genuine and genuinely hard-won. There is no hierarchy here, only different landscapes and the minds that learn to navigate them. What does matter is this. If you recognize yourself in this, the way this awareness developed was not a choice. It wasn't personality, it wasn't weakness or drama or being sensitive. It was adaptation. Your brain did what brains do. It learned to survive the world it was given, and it became very good at it. The signs don't always look like what people expect. It's not always struggle. Sometimes it looks like being the most emotionally intelligent person in the room and still feeling like no one quite understands you. Sometimes it looks like making yourself smaller because you read, very early, that your full presence was too much. Sometimes it looks like a kind of quiet loneliness, being deeply perceptive about everyone around you and still feeling unseen yourself. That loneliness makes sense. It is, in many ways, the logical result of spending years understanding others more readily than you've been understood. But the fact that you learned to read the world so carefully, to feel so much and process it so deeply, to carry the emotional weight of rooms and relationships with such quiet precision, that is not something to explain away or fix. It is genuinely a form of intelligence, one that most people will never develop because most people were never asked to. If something in this felt like recognition, not surprise, but recognition, there's likely more about the way your mind works that hasn't been named yet. The patterns that feel like personality are often something older and more interesting than that. There's more worth understanding. And if you're the kind of person this video was about, you probably already know it.